Good morning, students. Welcome to week 4 of organizational communication. You're well on your way to, you're pretty close. Your 8-week course, and we're in week 4 now. And I'm proud of you. I'm excited for you. And it reminds me of my journey going through my education process and still on that journey. We need to all be lifelong learners, don't we? You can see I'm wearing my Giants jersey today. San Francisco Giants. I like to follow them in baseball. I also like the Seattle Mariners as well, both because of places that I've lived and have family nearby. And I I'm also a Dallas Cowboys fan for football, so you might see that jersey on me as we continue through the course. But it's an honor to be with you here this morning. And so let me just open in prayer for you guys. Lord, thank you for these students. Thank you for everything that they are learning. And I'm appreciative of their commitment, their tenacity, the courage that they're displaying by being students online in the middle of having busy lives. Probably have even had people in their lives tell them that they're too busy to do this, or maybe not even understanding why they're doing this. I know I've experienced those things in my life while I'm doing the due diligence of being a student and moving forward with something that I believe you called me to do. And so I believe your calling is on these students. And I pray that that calling would be encouraged even this week as we look at how to resolve or manage conflicts within interpersonal, group, and entire organizational situations and environments. Okay, so let me share my screen here now, and let's get started. All right, I don't like my lighting in here. I'm going to adjust my lighting a little bit in my room. An ongoing, never-ending process, right, of how to have good lighting when you're doing online recording. Okay, so this week is about conflict, and you're going to see both words. I think your textbook uses the word resolve, but also brings up the idea of management. Um, let me just tell you a quick story about being a parent and how that works inside the environment of conflict. In this case, the organization would be a family unit, right? So mom and dad want resolve, right? There's conflict going on with the kids, with each other. I'm the middle of 3 boys, so I fought with both of them. And so that conflict going on, mom and dad want it to be resolved. They want it to be over with. But in raising children, my parents found out the reality is that right behind that conflict, there's going to be another one of another kind. I remember us traveling in the car many times, and while we're in the car and we're all bored, and all 3 of us are in the back seat, and the conflict goes up over space. One of us has goals of having to stretch our legs out, and the other one's like, "Don't put your legs on me." That same with laying your head on each other's shoulders. Sisters are probably a little better about that than brothers are, but the reality of it is, it was about managing it, because if you're going to go on a several 100-mile trip, you're probably not going to resolve the conflict of space and the conflict of goals that your 3 sons have in the back seat. So you're going to try to manage it, meaning that it's going to come up again and again and again. It's great idealism to think that conflict will be resolved in an organization. But the reality of it is, right behind that conflict, there'll be another one of another kind, hopefully with completely different people. And so, as a leader, you're working towards how to manage the different kinds of conflict that will come up within your organization. Okay. So this week, these are the things we're looking at. We're going to define conflict. We're going to explain the differences between positive and negative conflict. We're going to explain the main components of conflict. We're going to explain the role of conflict in the light of specific scriptural passages. We're going to look at the causes of online conflict and the realities of those. And because of that's part of the marketplace now, right? I mean, you're going to school online. I'm teaching online. I went to school online as well. Um, our church's staff meetings are online. So I'm in Zoom meetings at least twice a week. And there's people that have meetings that people are joining those Zoom meetings from all over the world. And so online is just part of our reality. And so it's right for us to address online conflict. We're also going to look at the stages or strategies of maintaining conflict or managing it, I should say. And then we're going to also look at the steps needed to make good and sound decisions regarding conflict management. All right, so let's change slides here. Conflict within organizations, right? This is an organizational communication course. So if we don't talk about the topic of conflict, we wouldn't be doing a very thorough job in addressing organizational communications. It would be wonderful if everybody always got along all the time, but unfortunately, that's just not a reality. We're going to look at the negative and positives, though, of conflict today, as I said a minute ago. So, in defining conflict, we're going to look at the stages of conflict and also, as I said, the ingredients of what conflict is. And we're going to look at 5 traditionally recognized conflict styles. And when I say that, style is a flexible word there because it's really just how people will typically behave when there is conflict. We're going to look at those 5, and then we're going to observe how personal, organizational, and cultural factors can all play significant roles in understanding how conflict comes about and is managed or mismanaged. Okay, so defining conflict. You'll see this definition in your textbook, so I'm just going to highlight it because I think it's a good one. The interaction of interdependent people who perceive opposition of goals, aims, and values, and who see the other party as potential interfering with the realization of those goals. I use the family unit as an example of an organization where you've got 3 boys that are growing, and as we got to be older, you know, that space got smaller that we were sharing, and we had perceived opposition. If our goal was to stretch out and our aim was to go to sleep in doing so, then that was valuable to us, right? And we saw that potential other parties as being our brothers as potentially preventing us or interfering with those goals. So now let's look at a bigger picture of thinking about that, how that would work inside of an organization as we move forward in defining conflict. So now we're looking at the 3 primary ingredients, I'm going to call it. Uh, you could say even if you were gonna bake a cake and the cake was going to be called conflict, there would be 3 ingredients that would go in, and you're probably going to have conflict. If you have incompatible goals, that's going to lead towards conflict. Interdependence, meaning that you have things in common that you need to work together, could be space in the case I mentioned, but it could also be a coworker that both share the same cubicle. One person works the day shift, the other person works the swing shift, somebody else works the graveyard shift, and one person is a clean freak, and the other person is a slob. on another shift, right? And so, but you're all sharing the same cubicle at work. And so then you've also the third ingredient, you've got the interaction that is going on, how you're going to manage it or not manage it, mismanage it would be a better way of saying it. So the incompatible goals means that we both want something. I mean, yeah, incompatible goals, we both want something. What I want is somewhat different than what you want. So let's use the example again of the cubicle. The clean freak in there, uh, and by the way, clean freaks don't call themselves clean freaks. Two of my adult children are clean freaks, and they just call it doing it the way it's supposed to be. So, but you're sharing this cubicle, and one person wants the pens and the highlighters and the notebooks and all of that organized. And that person thinks that your personal stuff should be probably packed up at the end of your shift and placed somewhere in some kind of container that is nearby. The person that is more relaxed about that just thinks, man, I spend a third of my day, my 24-hour period here in this cubicle. So, I want to feel like I can make it my own while I'm here. And so the goals there are incompatible. One person wants the cubicle kept a certain way, somebody else does not. And since you both want something and it's somewhat different, that could be in a minor way, like I'm talking about, of the simple care of a cubicle, but it could also be about something major. Um, it could be over, how a fire department is operated and run. And you've got incompatible goals between uh, fireman A and fireman B about how we're going to go about maybe taking care of a patient when we arrive on the scene in the middle of a crisis or an emergency. And so our goals are different. I think we should come in and approach it this way. Well, I think we should approach it this way, and conflict can arise. Now let's talk about interdependence. Interdependence means that we have some things in common, and we both, or if it's a group, we all need what we share in common. The simplicity of being in the back seat, the interdependence was we're all riding in the same car. So we got to work it out. We're all in the same car. It's the cubicle. We're working in the same workstation. So there is an interdependence here. We've got to figure out a way to make this work. And in the case of the fire station, uh, these guys are going to be, or these two coworkers, male or female, are going to be in a situation where you know they're sharing the same assignment, and so there's an interdependence for them to work as a team. And the fire captain is probably going to say, "You two need to work this out. You've got some conflict. You need to work it out. You can do it, work it out yourselves, or I'll get involved," which would mean a third party involved, right? We'll get there in a minute. And then thirdly, the interaction. We are in need of interacting with each other in some way or ways in order for us to be able to have effectiveness and success ongoing within our organization. So we have to work this out. Let me give you a sad negative example of when these ingredients are combined of incompatible goals, interdependence, and interaction would be on the freeway when you're watching road rage happen, uh, hopefully between two other people that are drivers of other vehicles. The incompatible goals would be I want to be in front of you, and you want to be in front of me at this next spot on the freeway as the lanes start to merge, right? And so there's an incompatibility. Who's going to be in front of who or behind who as we merge these two lanes on the freeway? The interdependence is that we're both on the same freeway heading in the same direction. So there's interdependence going on there. And then the interaction is that we are actually near each other on the same freeway at the same time. And that's some ingredients right there that can, unfortunately, turn into road rage of minor or major consequences, depending on how much emotional intelligence both drivers are able to share with one another. All right. Now let's look at the five traditional recognized conflict styles. And as I said, the word styles is a little bit flexible on whether or not that's even the right word, because it really is more just how people behave. So in this case, we'd be talking about organizational behavior. The first one is avoidance. I don't want to talk about it. It doesn't exist. Don't bring it up to me. Well, we have to talk about it. Well, I don't want to talk about it. And same thing can happen in families. Some people have been raised in a household where the approach by the parents, one of them or both of them, is just to avoid even talking about a problem. Where if I treat it like it doesn't exist, maybe it'll just go away on its own, which we know isn't real. That doesn't happen. The second one mentioned is the competition. So the competition is different than the avoidance. So if you look at the self-focus at the bottom of the screen there, bottom of your slide, you'll see self-focused, I've gotten blue. So you'll see these correspond. So in the avoidance approach to conflict, they're not thinking about themselves necessarily, and they're not thinking about others. So their effort, if you will, and consideration is just low on both. They just want to cover their ears and say it doesn't even exist. The competition person is very focused on themselves. It's to them, it's win lose. So when we're in this conflict, I'm going to do my best to overcome you, overpower you, unfortunately, even bully you in some instances. But I'm focused on myself, not really focused that much on you or anybody else involved. The accommodation person, I put that in burnt orange here because these are other focused people. Their self-focus is low and their focus on others is high. The problem is, unfortunately, the accommodating person can really be an enabler. And so they end up taking on way more of the responsibility for the relationship, for the rapport to happen in that environment. And so they will often just do whatever they can to accommodate the other person or the other group, so that to them it's a little more of an active version of avoidance. I want to avoid there being much conflict, so I will just say yes, I'll do it. Or in the case of, one of us is going to have to work Saturday, well, okay, well, I'll just do it because I know that you're going to get mad if you have to do it. The next level or next kind is compromise. And so they want to do a little bit of both. How about I give a little and you give a little? We'll both lose something, but maybe we'll both gain something here in the process. And then the last one is collaboration. And that is high focus on self, but also high focus on the other person. Collaboration happens when both parties are saying, hey, let's work as a team. Let's work this out. We can figure out a way to make this work. So among the traditional approaches, compromise and collaboration are the best. But the reality of it is there still are better ways that we can handle conflict as we continue to just put better effort into it. And we're going to look at more of these as we go forward. Okay. Let's talk about online conflict. What's that about? And how does it happen? How does it occur? What do we do about it when it happens? Well, interestingly, in your course outline, each and every course that you take with Life Pacific University, uh, it has a section in there that talks about netiquette. And that really is online communication to avoid conflict, not in the sense of avoidance, pretend it doesn't happen, but really more of an effort to say, let's get in there ahead of time and see if we can reduce the chance of conflict taking place. And so the incompatibility, I should say. Remember our three ingredients to a conflict: incompatible goals, interdependence, I mean, we're sharing something in common here, and we both need it, we both use it. And also the interaction. Now, how are we going to handle this? How much emotional intelligence are we going to show in being able to work this out? Um, so these are quotes literally from your course outline for this class and for others that you take. Here's one of them. Online learning is a form of social interaction. Could we not say that that is organizational communications? Um, you're communicating with your cohort members, you're communicating with your professor, I'm communicating with you as students. And if we're showing emotional intelligence, then we're going to be considerate to one another. So in this class, we're actually practicing every time we post in the discussion boards, every time you write a paper, every time I correct a paper, we're showing that we are going to work towards having healthy communication skills. And and if there's any conflict, meaning if there's in some way that we have incompatible goals in the middle of our interdependence and interaction, then we will find healthy ways to resolve it. Uh, so online learning is a form of social interaction. And the next sentence is LPU expects students to interact appropriately in the online environment. By the way, these are all found on page 11 of your course outline. Um, the next one is a key distinguishing feature of online courses is that communication occurs primarily via the written word. So what's missing when we do this? And I don't mean missing as in something wrong. I mean, it's just simply not available to us. It's not part of the design of online interaction in a course like this because we're not doing face to face. In Zoom meetings and Zoom staff meetings that you and I might be involved in, we are at least being able to look at each other's body language, hear each other's intonation of their voice, and hopefully there's been enough interaction going on where we'll know a little bit about each other's personality, sense of humor, uh, where maybe where their past pain is that we can help them avoid, creating damage to some experiences that they've had in their past and being aware of those to be sensitive. Um, but the way we're going to school here, it is almost all written unless we pick up the phone and call each other. And by the way, again, I encourage every one of you to call me and or text me. In fact, I would say text me before you call me and tell me who you are. And that way, when you do call, I'll have your name already in my phone. Okay. Um, why are there potentials for online conflict in a format that we're going to school? Because the lack of face to face interaction means that we are not getting body language, we're not getting voice tone, and we're not getting the instantaneous listener feedback. That's also absent. And given the absence of those ingredients, written communication can easily be misunderstood. We can come across as being blunt when we're not trying to be. We can come across as being insensitive. And so there's some things that we actually can learn from that. And so I'm going to give you some things to avoid. Your textbook, I mean, your course outline mentions a couple, but I'm gonna go through a little more detail. Sarcasm, simply because we don't know if we have the same context. So sarcasm can actually come across as being really insensitive, and it's discouraged in a format like ours. Humor needs to be contextualized in its understanding, and so unless we have interacted enough to know enough about what might be funny, to everyone in the group or between two people interacting. We need to be careful with that. Strong language, such as name calling, cussing, or inappropriate slang words that we've all heard in the marketplace. Just, let's just be careful not to use them, is what we're being taught, right? So that's our communication. And also bluntness. I had a professor when I was going to school that was so blunt online that almost everybody in our entire cohort, just by the end of the 8 weeks, were just mad at this guy. And I kept working hard. I did have to work at it, but I kept working hard to not assume the negative without having spent some time talking to him personally. And then I met him at graduation, and I was actually at the baccalaureate supper the night before and got to sit next to him. And he was one of the coolest dudes I ever met. So we all need to make sure that we're practicing giving each other the benefit of the doubt, but it is appropriate for you to ask questions for clarity. Did you mean to say it that way? Because I kind of took it like you might have meant this, and I just want to clarify. Uh, but don't assume the negative when you're asking for clarification. Okay, so that's part of what we need to practice when we're doing online uh, contact and interaction. And then online interaction that has a face-to-face element. I think there are four things that I have learned are important because, again, I'm regularly involved in meetings where somebody might be in the Philippines. Literally, these are examples that I'm sharing where one person's in Philippines, two other people were in New Zealand, another person was in France. I'm here in California, and three or four other people were scattered out to various parts of the United States. And we're all in this meeting, and we're actually going through a cohort. We're going through a 4 week training together, and we were online for 2 hours at a time once a week. And these are some things that I believe are really important for us to apply. First, that we want to avoid is impatience. Uh, One of the ways that can manifest is talking over the top of someone else when you're all in a meeting together. So it's important that you mute yourself until it's appropriate for you to talk, especially waiting until the moderator or the leader of the group is telling you to unmute yourself. Just make it a practice, mute yourself right away, and you can avoid having some potential conflict. The second thing is make sure you're fully present when you're in an online setting. I have taught some classes for a Bible college in another nation, meaning that I was here in the States and they're in another nation. And one of the things that would regularly happen is they would not be fully present. One student would regularly be doing something else while we were online. And so it was very distracting to the rest of us to wonder, are you even interested in what we're doing? And it can come across as being disrespectful and disinterested. We've all made the time to be here. You need to be fully present while you're here with us. My wife also teaches courses online, and she teaches full time. She's an RN, so she teaches in the medical field. And one of the expectations that she has is that when we're all online and we're online together, I don't want to see an animated image of yourself. I want to see you. And I want to see your eyes with the rest of us, because typically they've got 50 to 60 students that are all in one cohort online together. And she needs to know that they're actually fully present. And also not having just part of your face in the image, right? I mean, nothing more frustrating when you're trying to talk to somebody like you're probably right now going, Ken, get your face back in the screen, right? So that's important to be fully present when we're online interaction is happening. The third one is eliminating outside noise distractions, right? There's nothing more frustrating than you're all trying to be in a meeting and all of a sudden you can hear that somebody else is got stereo really loud in their house or something and it's causing a distraction, or they're trying to be in a meeting and they're out in public without headphones on to create a private environment. So, it's really important to make sure you've got a quiet, isolated environment for you to be in online interaction with others. And then the fourth one is nothing's more frustrating than being in a meeting that you're expected to be in and then you're ignored. Uh, at no point does the moderator ever ask for input, interaction, thoughts, questions, anything like that. Often those will happen at the end of a meeting if there's a lot of people, but that the opportunity is given, or in rare occasions where it's not, that the moderator explain why today we're not going to have time for us to interact in for questions, but the opportunity to be given to say in our chat zone in this Zoom meeting, go ahead and put any of your questions or any of your thoughts, and after the meeting's over with, we'll look at those and get back with you. Okay. All right. So that's enough for online conflict. Let's look at managing conflict. And as I said earlier, we can consider resolution or management. And management just basically means we're going to be probably helping people work through conflict in their lives or our own lives throughout our lifetime. Conflict resolution is about finalizing conflict, hoping that it's the last time that we will ever have to have this conversation again. Conflict management is more wisely handling conflict that is likely to come up again and maybe again in the process of people working together within an organization or even a family household. And now we're going to look at identifying some strategies for conflict management. What does the Bible say about conflict? I mean, we know what your textbook says for this class, and Catherine Miller does a great job of bringing all kinds of ideas and concepts into this. But what does the Bible have to say about it? I mean, what's addressed? So I'm going to encourage you to read chapter 6 in the book of Acts and include that in your journal this week. And that way I'll also know whether or not you are being thorough on interacting with your lecture videos, which is part of our communications for this communication course. Acts chapter 6 is such an important passage of scripture in addressing conflict, and it certainly was, there was resolution that happened, but in the bigger picture, they were cognizant of the fact that there will be other types of conflict that will come up, and we will need to manage those. I would prefer to say lead people through those as well. And so let's look at it. Act 6 has some components there. You've got Greek Jews and you have Hebrew Jews, and they're interacting with each other. And so you've got cultural and subcultural contexts that are not all exactly the same. So these people have different backgrounds. They've lived in different regions of the world. They've had different experiences. Yes, they have some things in common. They have their basic race in common. But inside of that, how Hebraic Jews many times felt about Greek Jews was different. And so what was happening was the Greek widows, and we can go ahead and put the implicitness of understanding that in this case, the widows were in the context of these were older women that had outlived their husbands. And so there was a generational factor. There certainly was cultural factor. And somehow, doesn't mean it was intentional, but the Greek widows were not getting taken care of. So when, the Target grocery delivery was happening from house to house, the Greek widows didn't get the food supplies. And so you can imagine how isolated they felt. You can imagine how dishonored they felt, disrespected, and not even whether or not they got angry, but just feeling like, do I matter? And so, thank God, somebody in the organization, meaning the church in Jerusalem, became aware of it and said, "Hey, we have a conflict here. We have a whole subculture of women that are not being taken care of. They're being ignored. We don't know if it's intentional, but we definitely need to address it." So avoidance was off the table, right? We're not going to avoid this. We're going to collaborate and we're going to work together and we're going to find a way to resolve this conflict in this situation and also to maintain it so that it doesn't come back up. And so that's what was happening. And that's all in Acts chapter 6. So I encourage you to read that this week. Another passage is in James 1, and you're going to be reading that in your scripture reflections throughout the course of these 8 weeks. And James is giving instructions to say, when you're communicating with each other, make sure that the first thing you do is be quick to listen. You know, slow down on your talking. God gave you 2 ears and one mouth. So maybe do twice as much of this as you do with this. And it's so important that we understand that because what James is addressing is what we would modern day refer to as active listening skills. That instead of just thinking about what we're going to say next, as soon as the person finishes their mouth or takes a deep breath and we jump in and we've already got something to say that potentially could even be countering what they're saying right now, or at least dishonoring in the sense that we're not really valuing what they're in the middle of trying to communicate right now. So slow down, James says. Listen well. Don't just let them finish, but really listen and probably ask some questions for clarity so that we really understand what it is that they're wanting to communicate to us. Modern day coaching training, which I have gone through, is all about doing that. It's about asking questions about what they're saying, not to create conflict, but to draw out of them and make sure that they're really getting out what they want to say, and also that I am really hearing what it is they're wanting to communicate. And if there is a lot of emotional intelligence going on in that interaction, then that is reciprocated, where both people or both groups are going to be doing the same thing. And since you're going after a degree in organizational management, helping people learn how to show emotional intelligence in their communicational interactions is critical to their career and their success, and certainly for the organization. So also, we're going to talk about it in just a minute, but in Matthew chapter 18, Jesus addresses how to handle conflict, meaning that he knows it's going to happen. And so he gives 3 stages to it. And Philippians 2, the first 11 verses of Philippians chapter 2 really addresses how we can behave toward each other the way Jesus behaved. Philippians 2 shows us the stages of communication from heaven to earth. That, even though we know we have the Christmas story and we have the understanding of Mary conceiving a baby from the Holy Spirit, and then Jesus being born into a family, which is known as the incarnation, where God became flesh, the name Emmanuel, God near us. That all is a perfect picture of heaven communicating to you and I. God near us, if we apply that to the scriptures in James that we were just mentioning, God came even closer so he could make sure he was listening well. In Matthew chapter 9, there's a place where it shows Jesus walking, it says, from town to town and village to village, and he was brokenhearted over what he saw. What was he doing? He was listening. He was listening to body language. He was listening to words. He was looking at people in pain, and he was putting himself in their shoes, which is a big component to heaven communicating with you and I on a personal level. And so these are all fantastic examples of ways that we can see the Bible addressing organizational communication and handling conflict when it comes up. The Last Supper is another example that I wanted to give you. And that is Jesus is with his disciples. He's told them he's about to leave. And in essence, these knuckleheads all get in an argument about who's going to be in charge. Like they're not even grasping, they weren't listening well to what was going on, and then asking Jesus active questions like, okay, so tell us what we do now. Give us instructions, Lord, about how we can handle this. And, you know, who's in charge? What's the hierarchy of control and organization in this thing? And Jesus addresses it by saying, quit acting like you're better than each other, for starters. And I want you to wash each other's feet, not just physically, but practically. I want you to literally put yourself in the other person's shoes and address that person as valuable. And if you do that, all of you are going to start communicating better as a team within the organization known as the kingdom of heaven, right? Okay. So those are some great scriptures. Lastly, we're going to just talk about mediators and arbitrators. Your textbook addresses these. They're both third-party conflict management approaches. A mediator is someone that it doesn't necessarily mean that there is any money on the table. It means that they're mediating relationship, they're mediating interaction. In Matthew chapter 18, as I mentioned a minute ago, Jesus addresses time in conflict situations where a mediator is needed. So he says in this chapter that two people might be in conflict over something and they're trying to work it out. But in the middle of them trying to work it out, they have not yet come to healthy answers. They've not yet come to a place where they feel like they're on the same page and they've now got common goals, they've got common interdependence, and they've got common interaction. That they're still not on the same page yet. Their goals are still incompatible. And Jesus says, when that happens, bring in a third party. Now, the interesting thing is in the Western world context, we tend to see conflict as an opportunity for there to be a winner and a loser. The Bible doesn't think it like that. The Bible wants us all to learn how to live in the village and work it out. In fact, in two-thirds world context, meaning other than the Western world context, village thinking, meaning community awareness and community harmony, is way more important to the village than it is over these two people that are in conflict. In the Western world, we're so independent in our thinking that we think, hey, I'm going to win and they're going to lose. And yet, that isn't the Bible's approach. The Bible's approach is for us to have mutuality and for us to wash each other's feet, to put ourselves in the other person's shoes and work it out so that we can move forward for ourselves and for the group and for the entire organization. And so Jesus says, bring in a third party and have the third party come in and listen well to both of you. In the Western world view, we think of that person as coming in to reinforce our opinion. That person's going to come in and help me win my case. The other person is thinking the same thing. I need to bring in a mediator as well, and I'm going to win my case. That's not what a mediator is doing in a biblical sense. In that case, the third party is coming in to help both of you hear each other. How would be example of that would be a counselor that would be helping a couple in their marriage to sit down with both of them and help them listen well to each other because they can be way more objective than these two people that are in the conflict. So this third party person is not in the conflict and they're going to help them work it out. And work environments, that could be a supervisor. If it's the horizontal level in a relationship, maybe there's somebody that the group already knows has just got some great wisdom. Well, let's go ask Mary what she thinks. She always seems to have good ideas and she seems to really listen well, and maybe she can help us work it out. I would also say this is the field of professional coaching now. Coaches, that's what they do. They help the person draw out what's going on. What's different between a therapist, counselor, and a professional coach is this. The professional therapist is going to take you backwards. What has preceded this? Okay. Anything in your childhood where you've got some hurts and some experiences that really wounded you that might be coming up now, that's a therapist. The professional coach is going to say, where are we going to go from here? What goals can we set now to alleviate this conflict and turn it into something where we can have positive impact? And so this is where the positive and negative conflict can come in. So the negative conflict is it's just going to get worse. And it's just going to increase. The gap is going to get wider between the two parties, either individuals or groups. The positive conflict means that because this came up, we now have a chance to do it better. There you go with Acts chapter 6 that we talked about a little while ago. In Acts 6, it needed to be brought up, so avoidance was not going to work. It needed to be brought up so that it could be addressed, and then everyone was taken care of, and the entire church slash organization was the better for it. It was so important that that was handled well that we were given that in the Holy Scripture so that you and I can come back and read it now and see how to handle that. So that would be the role of the mediator. The arbitrator, on the other hand, means there's cash on the line. Okay. So you have two parties that don't have compatible goals over a certain amount of gold, if you will. So the perfect example of that would be arbitrators over professional athletes. So the arbitrator is going to come in and say, okay, there's only so much money to go around here, and you guys are wanting to divide the pie. I'm going to come in as the arbitrator and determine legally what would be the fair and equitable right judgment in this particular case. The arbitrator sometimes literally could even be in a small claims court where two people are coming in and one's the landlord and one's the tenant, and they're arguing about rent or about having their deposit given back to them. So an arbitrator is going to be dealing with the financial side of it and helping bring resolution there. Okay. Wow. In closing up here, we can certainly see that there is positive and there is negative forms of conflict. Conflict is simply part of life, folks. We all deal with it and we're always going to. It's not realistic for us to think that there won't be conflict. And as I said, sometimes conflict is needed. It's useful in order for new ideas, new concept, fresh approaches, to handle something that we realize, you know what? If that conflict hadn't come up, we wouldn't have solved this and we wouldn't be where we are now. So I'm glad that came up. That can happen at the interpersonal level, at the group level, or at the entire organization level. Okay. Well, we're done with the slides. So I just want to tell you how much I appreciate all of you. And here we are. At the end of this week, you'll be halfway through this course and well on your way to your goals and your aspirations towards your degree in organizational management. Bless all of you students, and we'll see you online.